are getting ready to custom quilt our first block. So here we are getting ready to quilt this block. So I've got it loaded. I'm going to go over to my design center. We're going to walk through what we do now. Okay, so we're going to come to my design center. Then what we're going to do is we're going to scan this frame in. So I'm going to come to my leaf. If you do not have the leaf, then it's already on this main screen and you should see these. And so we are going to choose an image scan because we just want a picture of it so we can design on top of it. So we're going to scan it and say, okay. So here's our image. If I hit this leaf, some of you have a flower, some of you have a leaf. So I'm going to hit this leaf. It makes it brighter so I can see what I'm actually working on. Okay. So what I want to do is I want to create a fill pattern around this whole pattern. I'm going to crop out the bride and the groom so that we can quilt around them, because I have found on these photo blocks, either do the whole thing, but is what you can do, or you could do nothing. But my favorite is to do the background. So I'm going to do the background on this one. So what we're going to do is I'm going to enlarge this so I can see what I'm doing first. So I'm going to go to 400. That's too much because I can't see. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a line around these kids. All right, I'm going to scoot this back a little bit. So I'm going to come up here to my line tools. Some of you only have the page. Some of you can go in through this. I'm going to go in through the page. I am going to choose my double run. I'm going to choose red because it's nice and bright and I will be able to see it. And I'm going to choose this lightning bolt. That allows us to click, 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 click around an image. This one lets us free draw, which I don't have very good luck with. This one lets us free draw, closes it. This is a straight line. This one lets us click, 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 click. So I'm going to choose that one. I'm going to say okay. Now I am going to start clicking around these kids. So I'm going to make them a little bit lighter so that you can see what I'm doing, but yet I can still, that's too light. I can't see what I'm doing. All right. So now what I'm going to do is, oh, this mouse isn't plugged in. Let me plug that in. I'm going to start right here. I am not going to go, let me show you what I'm not going to do. So I'm going to zoom in. I am not going to follow her hair exactly. I'm going to give myself like a 1/4 inch gutter. So because this machine isn't real accurate, sometimes if you have a bunch of stuff on it, it isn't. So I'm just creating a gutter around them that will make them pop. So I'm going to start clicking. Now I'm going to click once. Now the square goes around it. Your second click has to be outside of the square for it to take. So I'm going to click, and then I'm just going to do a rough outline because we're not going to stitch this line in the end. It is just to create the box that's going to hold our fill. So I'm just going to click around my bride. Okay, I'm going to choose the hand and I'm going to drag this up so that I can go around my dress at the bottom. Okay, and it did not take for some reason. Oh, when I chose the hand, it unchose. So I'm going to hit back, back to make sure that I am connected to this dot. So then I am going to click, click, click. Delete this video. First thing we're going to do is we're going to scan in the hoop that is in our frame so we know what we're drawing. So we're going to go to our leaf. Some of you don't have a leaf. You just have these items that are out on your main screen. So either way, you're going to choose the image scan, and we're going to scan and say okay. Okay, so it's all scanned in. We can see it here. This light leaf, dark leaf, the dark leaf or flower make it brighter so we can see what we're doing. The lighter one makes it a little bit lighter. I like to kind of go in the middle. That way I can see what I'm doing when I'm drawing. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a box for this to go in. So I'm going to create a fill pattern to do in the background. Okay, so then what I'm going to do is I'm going to create the box that's going to hold the fill pattern. So I'm going to come here to, nope, that's not where I'm going. I'm going to come here into my line. These are line properties. Oops, cancel. Line properties, undo. Line properties, fill properties, create object properties. So we're going to go into the line properties. We're going to choose the double line. We're going to choose the lightning bolt because that allows us to click, 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 click around our picture. We're going to choose red so it's bright so we can see it and say, okay. Then I am going to zoom in so I can see what I'm doing better. Now, when I create this line around my bride and groom, I don't want to go exactly because it's going to hold the fill pattern. I don't want the fill pattern to go all the way up to them. And we're not going to actually stitch this line in the end. So I'm going to click, click, click. And you see how I'm leaving a gutter around the kids? I don't want it right at them. Okay, then I'm going to use my little slider bars here, and I'm going to slide down and over so that I can go around them. Now I'm seeing kind of a distortion in my image here, so I'm going to back out a second. And something interrupted my scan. Okay, so see how this isn't doesn't look like my star? So I have like drug something over it, or I've done something that has distorted the camera. So before I go any further, I need to go back and rescan. So I'm going to go to my scan, image scan, scan it again. I'm going to start over because we want to have a complete image. Okay, so let's check it this time before we get started. I'm going to make this dark. I've got all of my pieces here. I don't have that blurry spot down here. Okay, and it actually saved my line that I've already put around there. I didn't know it would do that. So that's I wanted to show you this because I put in the wrong bobbin thread, so I had to take this out. And you know, sometimes like when you are stitching, it punctures into the fabric. But this, I pulled out all the threads and I've scratched out all the stitches, and look how great that is. I used a new sharp needle, and I mean, you can see a little bit of the ridges, but that's expected, but it did not punch holes in the fabric. And I can totally redo this now, so you don't have to be afraid to sew through if you have to redo something. Looks great. I just wanted to show that. All right, as you can see, there are no repercussions to having to rip that out. And it quilted up beautiful. This is a little bit puffy to give it dimension like I like. Next, we'll move over here to the sides. Okay, so when it got to this point where the outline was here, I just didn't stitch that. So if you want to stitch it, you can stitch it if you want it outlined. I do not. I like it more loose like it is. So I'm going to hit home and say, okay. All right, now I want to start designing for the rest of my block. So I'm going to come here to my leaf. Basically, go to your leaf to have these. If you have it on your home screen, we're just doing an image scan. We're scanning it. Okay. We're going to scan this and we're going to start creating the custom quilting for the other parts of the block. Okay, so I'm going to turn this up a little bit so we can see. So I'm aiming for this part right here. All right, so in this corner, I'm going to go and look and see what shapes I have. My daughter is very much a flower person, so I'm going to try to find a flower that I like. So I think I could either use this one or this one. I think I'm going to use this one, number 15. Say okay. Then I'm going to come to size. I'm going to shrink this down. Then I'm going to take my finger and I'm just going to move it down here. Now you can, do a square in your square, but I have found that it's really hard to get it lined up just perfectly, even with the projector. So I'm going to say, okay. And I think I want to add a center to those flowers. That way it can all, and I'm going to zoom in on this so you can see it better. So let's go to 400, use my hand, come over here. And one of the reasons I'm going to do this is right now it's going to sew this, stop, cut, sew, stop, cut. If I add a circle to connect all of these in the middle and erase the part that doesn't need to be there, then it can all stitch in one continuous motion without it having to stop and do all those cutoffs. So I'm going to come to my shapes here. I'm going to go to circles. I'm going to say okay. I'm going to go to size because I can't even see it. It's so big. So then I'm going to shrink it way down because it always comes in around 6 inches. And actually, I'm going to zoom back out so we can find it. So there it is there. And let's come to size and let's shrink it. And then we'll move it kind of down over here in the corner and then we'll zoom back in. All right. So now let's zoom back in. All right, that looks like it's about the right size. All right, so now I have my hand activated. I'm going to unactivate my hand so that way I can move. Well, that's not letting me do it. There it went. Now I unactivated my hand. So I'm going to position this circle so it's touching all of, let me make sure this is close enough. Yeah, I think it is. That it's touching all of the leaves of the petal. Okay, so now when it goes to stitch, it's all connected and it will not do all the cutting that it would if I didn't connect to these. Okay, so I'm just going to move it around here like this and say okay. Now, once I unselect this, it's going to actually weld to the leaves. Okay, so I'm going to click off into my white space. Now see how everything gets bright again so you can see it? So I'm going to go in and I'm going to erase part of this. So I'm going to choose my eraser and I'm going to use my pen. If you have your pen, you can use your pen. If you don't have a pen, and look there, I erased part of that I didn't want to. So I'm going to undo. All right, so I'm going to get my eraser and I'm going to shrink this down so it's really tiny. Okay, so see how tiny that is now? So I can erase these little middle parts and I got a hole there, so I want to undo that. Here's another tip when you are erasing. Release often. So I'm going to come here and erase this. Then I'm going to let go of my mouse button. Then I'm going to come here and erase this. And I'm going to let go of my mouse button. Because otherwise, if you have to undo something, then you have to redo everything. Whereas if you release your mouse button quite often, then you don't have that. So I'm just erasing these extra parts here. All right, and I like that. All right, so I'm going to put this in the memory on my USB. All right, so that is on this side of the machine memory. If I want it to save on the design side, which is line art, and on the embroidery side, when I click on next, this is where I will put it in the memory that it will save on the embroidery side and on the line art side. But this has got a zigzag stitch on it, and I absolutely don't want that. So what I'm going to do in case well, let's just go in here and let's change this to double line, turn it red, say okay. Now it's changed it to that. Okay, so now it's a double line. I want this stitch to be a little bit longer. 0.08 is pretty tiny, so I'm going to take it up to, I believe, like 0.12, which is about 1/8 of an inch stitch. So it's not so tight and will hopefully be a little bit softer. All right, now I'm going to put this in the memory on my USB. Okay, then I'm going to hit return, and I'm going to copy it. It won't let me copy it because it's not selected. So if I want to select this item, I'm going to come here to my selection tools. I'm going to choose my magic wand, or you can just choose your square if that's all you have and draw a square around it. But I'm going to touch this. Okay. Now, if I wanted to grab it with my square, I would touch the square and I would just draw a box around it to get the whole thing. So you can grab it either way. Then my duplicate button activates. So I'm going to click on duplicate. I'm going to move this up here into this little block. All right. And then I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some quilting right in here. So I think what I'm going to do is add some lines. So I'm going to come here to my page. I'm going to use my clicker tool. I'm going to say I want double lines and I want it green. And I'm going to say, okay. Now, actually, I think I'm going to turn it red like this. So here's the deal with that. If I have this red and this green, when I go to stitch this out, it's going to stop in between the steps. Okay. If I change it red, then it will automatically stitch right through everything that I take over at the same time. Okay. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to leave it red so that way I don't have it stopping and me having to start it. So I'm going to zoom it up to 200%. And I'm going to move this over here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my little clicker tool. Some people call it the lightning boat. I call it the click tool. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to left click once, left click, and I'm just going to come here and I'm just going to do a little diagonal pattern. And I'm going to make it all in one swoop so that I don't have any starting and stopping. Doesn't have to be exact. If you do feel like it needs to be exact, you can turn on your grid. Let's look at that. If I come in here and I turn on my 3/8 inch grid, okay. Now I can kind of see and I can judge my distance. Okay, I'm going to turn that back off, go into my settings, turn that back to off. All right. And I am going to do one more V in this, I believe. And then I'm going to be done. Now, to get this to disconnect without connecting to that endpoint, you just come over here and you can choose any tool. Like I could choose my hand tool. And that should make it disconnect. But it didn't. Okay, so let's choose our eraser. All right, our eraser made it disconnect. All right, so that line and that square disappeared, so you know that it is disconnected. All right, now I want something little right here. So let's see, what do we want to put in there? Let's look at our shapes. If there's any flowers or swirls or anything that we would want to put in there. This looks kind of cute. Let's add that. And let's size it and let's shrink it down. And then let's move it over where we can see it. Let's take our finger and drag it. All right. So then if I want to rotate it, I can say, okay, rotate. See, that's too far, so I'm just going to rotate it. And move it diagonally. And I think that's still a little bit too big, so let's size it down a little bit. So I went to size, and then I'm going to my proportional sizing here. And I'm going to have some other videos up that go into more detail about how to use these tools so you don't get lost during this. All right, so I like that. Actually, I think I want to make it move down this way a little bit more so it's in the center of that square. And okay. All right, and then I'm going to duplicate it. Bring this up here. Then I'm going to rotate it. Whoops, don't need it but once. And I can position this how I want it, right about there. Say okay. Then I'm going to zoom out and I'm going to see how that looks. I'm going to make my picture lighter so I can see what my quilting looks like. So there's what my quilting looks like. Okay. So I'm going to come to next. Okay, so my flowers are 0.12. If I hit the next arrow, it's going to the next things. Everything that is this stitch at 0.08, I want to change it to 0.12. So before I change each individual one, I'm going to lock everything, and it will grab everything that has a 0.08 stitch and a red, because that's what we designed everything. So I'm going to lock them and see how it puts a square around everything. And I'm going to tell it I want it to be 0.1. Actually, I think I want to make it a little bit smaller. Let's do 0.11 and okay. All right. So now if I push the memory button, it's going to save it on the line art side so I can modify it if I want. And it's going to save it on the embroidery side. So I'm going to put it in the memory on the USB. Then I'm going to set it and say okay. Okay, so now I am ready to embroider. And this must be an old scan. Let's scan it one more time because this doesn't look like it fits. So let's just make sure that something hasn't gone awry. So I am going to hit my camera. I'm going to scan and say, okay. All right. So now we have our scan back. And look, it fits perfectly. All right. Now, if you want to check one more thing to make sure that it looks like it's going to stitch in the correct place, let's go to embroidery. Then you have your projector. If I click on the projector, now I can take a look at this and see if it is going to work. Okay, so I'm going to use this phone in my hand so that I can... So I'm going to use my finger to drag the box where I want to check. Then when I come over here, it's in the right spot. Then I'm going to come over here. I'm going to plant my finger and I'm going to drag this down. I'm going to see if my flower is in the right spot. I'm going to come back over here. Yes, my flower is in the right spot. Then I'm going to come drag my finger, plant my finger, drag back up. And I'm going to come back over here. And that is exactly where I want it. So I am ready to start stitching. And I'll show you what happens when we're done. See how this is all stitching in one motion? So that way we don't have all those tie-offs on the back to cut. So I like trying to make my quilting designs all in one piece. Looks great. Now I'm going to take and I'm going to flip this side over here and then we'll start again. We are loaded. We've got this side over here and now I've got this side ready to be lined up. So we'll walk through that in the next step. All right, here we go. So what we're going to do is over on this embroidery side of the machine, because it's exactly the same on both sides, what we're going to do is we're going to hit return. We're going to rescan. So that way we can get it lined up. Okay, now we can see where we're at. So let's come to edit. And let's hit move. Let's move this down. Now I can see from this box that is around them that I really probably need to rotate this a little bit. So I'm going to say okay, and I'm going to come out here to rotate because under rotate, we have rotate and move buttons. So I'm going to rotate this 1%. Then I'm going to start trying to move this into place. Move it up this way just a smidgy. All right, so the main one I'm looking at is this one right here. The flowers and the little swirls, they can kind of be about anywhere and look good. But I want to make sure that that lines up and that looks good. So I'm going to say okay. Then I'm going to go to embroidery, and I'm going to use my projector again. So I'm going to hit the projector. And I'm going to move this over this way so I can check and make sure that my arrow is in the right place. And I don't think you can see it from here. So here my arrow is lining up. Sorry about the rainbow effect. That's just how the projector works. I'm going to plant my finger on the square. I'm going to drag it down. Make sure that my flower is in my square. And it is. So I'm good to start stitching. Here's a little checkup to see how good we're doing. Looking good. All right, so now we're ready for these two shapes, and I'll show you how to get those last two done. So now I've got it hooped up, so this area, and then I'll have to rehoop one more time for this area. Okay, so we are going to have to go back over to the design center and pull this design apart, because once we bring this all over in one swoop from the design center, we can't break this apart. So we're going to go home and say, okay. Then we're going to go to My Design Center. We are going to pull out of our pocket, from our USB, from our B pocket, our design. Okay? Now, we need to get rid of these two flowers. So what we're going to do is we're going to click off into the space. Okay? Then I'm going to use my selection tool. I'm going to either use my square or my magic wand. I'm going to use my magic wand. I touch this, put the square around it. I'm going to cut it, and I'm going to delete it. Okay? Then, just so I'm using something different, I'm going to use the square, plant my finger. Now, you have to make sure that when you get these little dancing ants, that it gets the whole thing, because anything that isn't in there, it's going to chop off and leave. Okay? So I let go. It snaps to it. I'm going to cut that. All right? Then I'm going to close. Then I'm going to go to next. And my settings are still the same. All of them are the 0.112, so that's perfect. I'm going to put this in the memory on my USB, so I have it saved individually on both sides of the machine because I'm in this middle screen here. Set is the bridge of no return. If I haven't saved it over in the line art, it's gone. All right, so now I'm ready to embroider. So I'm going to go to embroidery, and I'm going to scan. And I'm going to see if it's in the right place. All right. It actually looks pretty good, but we're still going to have to do some fine tuning. So I'm going to come to layout, and I'm going to do rotate again, because under rotate, I have rotate and move. So if I need to rotate anything, I'm in good shape. So I'm going to move this up this way, down a little bit. That looks pretty good. I will do my projector again here. And I will check and make sure that looking at the projector that it's projecting in the right place. Plant my finger, drag this over. It looks really good from my view, so I'm going to go ahead and embroider it, and we'll take a look when I'm done. All right, so I flipped my block, so the blank side is over here, so I'm going to scan it again. All right, so here is my new background that I've rehooped. So now I've got to go adjust it. So I'm going to go into rotate. I'm going to move it down, move it over. Looks like I got it hooped pretty straight, so it looks like I'm ready to go again. So this will be my last sweep, and this block will be done. All right, here is our finished quilted block. I hold it at different angles so you can kind of see how it looks. Looks gorgeous. Okay, So if you look at the back, because we made these flowers all connect, we've only got one connector so we have some little trimming we have to do. But for me, that's good TV time work, keeps me awake so I can spend time with my family. First block done. And I'll see you on the next block. What we're going to do is I'm going to do all these quilt as you go and then join them with a sashing. So I'm going to quilt all my blocks individually. You're going to see every one of them be quilted. And I do have this. I am coming up with the different star patterns for every size photo that you could put in the middle of it as a free giveaway. So please follow me on all of my channels, and I will put all those links below, and see you on the next block.